Hey YouTube, I don't intend to spend the rest of my life talking about the Book of Lies. This really just started out as a one-time video to just challenge a Satanist if he could decode the chapter heading of chapter 0 of the Book of Lies. And I knew that person wouldn't take the challenge, and I was really just going to leave it at that. And somebody named Sophia came forward with a sum for the according to the numbers of the Greek letters of the chapter heading, and it was the sum is there's issues that need to be discussed about that, owing to the fact that the Hebrew letter number code would render the number 11 as a very destructive number. I do want to add to this that Kabbalah is not unilaterally about the number 11 being absolutely bad, all right? Jewish culture has a long history. There was obviously a time before Kabbalah came along, and even when Kabbalah came along, it was underground for the most part. It was very much behind closed doors. It was always a little controversial. With Jewish culture, there were positive connotations for the number 11. Of course there were. The people who were into the study could easily reconcile to that, because as a written word, the word 11, akad osur, means it literally means 110, which is the reverse of how the numerical expression goes of yod aleph, which is 10-1. So, depending on how you used it and what you meant. And now in charts, because secrecy was such a thing, they could obscure their meaning, and the numerical expression of 11 could be really what they intend as the word 11, because they would want to confuse prying eyes. So you never knew. But to express it numerically in a deeply hidden occult phrase with nothing to follow it up with that might stabilize it, if the sum were to end in 11, or the phrase were to end with 11 as a standalone, especially a number as large as 2,211, forget it. That's just bad, okay? It's absolute destruction, an incomprehensible level of destruction. I confronted him about, in this book, contradictions about the number 11. The issue is the number 11, okay? So Crowley, in this book, says bad things about negative things, about the number 11. Then he says very positive things about the number 11. And I pointed that out in the video, and I finally pinned down Sophia to say something about, when it's a bad number. Like in part 1, The Universe as It Is, Crowley says, the number 11, the Hendikad, the accursed shells that only exist without the divine tree, 1 + 1 = 2, in its evil sense of not being 1. Sounds like an out-of-control ancient Gnostic. Number 2 is not evil in Hebrew Kabbalah. It's ridiculous to say Hebrew Kabbalah. Kabbalah came from Jews, okay? Live with it. You don't like Jews, you don't like Kabbalah. Part 2, the universe as we seek to make it, as opposed to part 1, the universe as it is. In part 2, the universe as we seek to make it, 11 is a wonderful number, the great magical number, as uniting the antitheses of 5 and 6, etc., AVD, the magic force itself. Now, to the negative connotation of 11, Sophia said this to me in a personal message. Crowley is looking at this number from a pre and post point of view. As Crowley writes, all thoughts are false because they lead to a dualistic process. Crowley describes this admirably in Lever 242, or Aha. He further describes the defense of the soul against assailing thoughts, and shows that the duality of consciousness is a blasphemy against the unity of God, so that even the thought called God is a denial of God as he is in himself. Pretty wound up. Now, although the universe in this dualistic state, although the universe is in this dualistic state, but I must add illusory, this is what we have to work with. It helps to remember the saying in the Chaldean oracle, even the evil germs of matter work toward the good. Okay. Crowley does this a lot. The number 11 is 2 ones, the digits. He adds the 2 digits. That's number 2. For some reason, number 2 is evil. Don't believe this. I mean, he says it. Play with it. Look deeper. Duality does have something to do with why the number 11 is so extremely bad. Okay, not like it's evil or immoral, but it's disastrous. It's destructive, and duality does have something to do with it. But the fact that he wants to just leave it there is for scratching one's head about. Then with part 2, the universe as we seek to make it, and how the number is wonderful because it brings the number 5 and the number 6 together. I don't want to talk about the meaning of number 5 or 6, but let's say that's a really good thing. It's a wonderful thing, let's say. Well, what's the deal here? Okay, they contradict one another. You're going to try to look at each one way, it's positive. Look at it another way, it's negative. And so it's a triangle. Okay? And Pan-Sophia uses this analogy. Okay, one lower corner of the triangle is, well, let's call it the thesis, and the other lower corner is the antithesis. And you bring these 2 polarized ideas, these 2 contradictions together in a new synthesis at the apex of the triangle. That's all well and good, bringing contrary ideas together, bringing together opposites. It's a form of mentation. It's valid. And you know something? The number 11 can mean anything to anybody they want it to mean. Okay? There's no real deal with the number 11. But call it whatever you want to call it. But if it's anything but what Hebrew Kabbalah calls it, don't call it Kabbalah. Now, even though Pan-Sophia can come across as very informed, he can be annoying to talk to. He'll pass over things that I've said, completely ignore them. He'll talk about a subject in no way in any sort of context as to what I've said about something. And when he talks about numbers, he never gives any indication of what those numbers mean. Just talks about numbers in relation to other numbers and patterns of numbers, and that's it. And no matter how often I've said, look, stop doing that, he keeps doing it. And on the page, he simply seemed to just refuse to reply to a comment in order, from a descending order so that other people could follow along. And I must have confronted him about that 3 times, and he just kept doing it. So we're not friends, but I thought I might keep him around as the resident Crowleyite. No, let's keep NealFox honest, and you can be the resident Crowley guy. And I even said I liked him, and I did. But it became annoying, and I just said, look, I'm gonna just walk away from this. No, don't do that. Let's keep contact. And so, okay, I finally had to disagree with him point blank. I thought we were on familiar enough terms at that point that I could do some kidding around at the end, which I do with friends, and he didn't take too well to that. So sometimes when people at their most unpleasant, we find out who they really are. So, and in this case, to what I've said in this video here, which I said in a message to him, he says, I've stepped lightly on the subject of Crowley and not to break any obligations. This should give a clue on why I've been silent on a few issues. Okay, this is the big reveal in the movie, that he's an initiate of some kind with some group, maybe a Crowley group, maybe Taylor Monk. I don't know. We've heard it all before, but you know, he's read a lot of Crowley. I mean, that he can demonstrate. And then he says, "You do seem to know your stuff, I'll say that, but it becomes twisted in many areas. Crowley speaks for himself on the analysis of number in gematria. You can't ignore his words and then make it out to be something it is not, only because it doesn't pander to your prejudice. You seem to only take Crowley in pieces, where his entire system needs a firm grasp to be able to understand and appreciate it." I will meet the challenge. Lucifer will talk about 2211 in terms of the number system as laid out in the surface text of this book strictly. Okay. Oh, I have to warn people with a background, in my kind of background, okay, that Crowley can sound like an idiot who's just making up meanings to numbers to suit himself. But the reality of it is he's juggling a lot of balls, okay? And he's in one in the same chapter heading, he's trying to say something to me, something to Pansophia, and something to a Freemason. He is saying 3 distinct but related things in one chapter heading to 3 distinct but related points of view, okay? Namely, my point of view, Pansophia's point of view, and a Freemason's point of view. And that's why Chapter 0 and its commentary constitute an occult masterpiece. And, you know, Thunderstruck got on me about calling what she calls Part 1 of this book, and I think I called it Part 2. And what I was about with that is, if you've never opened this book, the introduction has chapters. And it seems to me the first part. And then there's Liber 418, and she calls that Part 1. So call it whatever you want to call it. It's called Liber 418 with all of this Latin. And then Chapter 1, verse 60 was a reference I made. Okay? And I should say that the 2 organizations associated with Crowley's works is the A therefore A, mathematical symbol therefore, and the OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientis, okay? These groups are riddled with factionalism, and you're always going to meet some genius who thinks he's the last word, and some other genius says, no, he's an idiot.